Welcome back to another episode of Sal and Pal's Go to the Movies. This is another Throwback Thursday review, and I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hi, guys.
And today we're going to be reviewing The Wizard from 1989. And just a fair warning, there is going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. A boy and his brother run away from home. They hitchhike across the country with the help of a girl they meet along the way. They're traveling to California to compete in the Ultimate Video Game Championship. So we're going to start off by naming some people in the cast. First of all, we got Fred Savage playing Corey Woods. We have Luke Edwards playing Jimmy Woods, the Wizard. We have Jenny Lewis playing Haley. We have Beau Bridges, who plays Sam Woods, the father. We have Christian Slater, who plays Nick Woods, the older brother of Corey and Jimmy. We also have Jackie Vinson, who plays Lucas, or the kid with the power glove. And this is a little Easter egg for everybody. We have Tobey Maguire's first screen appearance playing Lucas's goon in this movie. He doesn't say much, he's not credited, but if you see the movie, you'll see him during the video Armageddon scenes. So I'm going to start off with my pros. I liked how this movie revolved around the NES console. Actually, when I was a kid, when I watched this movie, that's basically what I focused on, just the gaming aspect of it. I vaguely remember what the story was. And then this is the second movie that we actually review on my podcast, which has featured Fred Savage. So that's kind of an interesting thing. We didn't plan it, it just happened. And then, so there's not much pros to say about this movie other than that the games were kind of interesting idea. And going on that, I would actually want to pitch this saying that this script with a little rewriting can actually be remade today with the addition of esports. We can actually play on the focus on the character Jimmy. I like the focus that they put on him specifically without mentioning his mental problem that he suffered. It basically just made us see that this movie was more about accepting people and saying that everybody can be treated equally, especially Jimmy. Even though some people were calling him a weirdo and everything, he excels in something else. So in a sense, it's kind of a movie meant for kids so they can actually get the idea of everybody might be a little different. So it's okay if you're different because that's what sets us apart from everybody. If not, we would all be the same cookie cutter person. And then my last pro, which is going to lead me into my cons, is that some of the lines are funny, but other lines are really, they didn't age well with the movie. So they kind of get a little cheesy, corny, or lame, if you want to call that. And with that, I'm going to go into my cons. The story was somewhat scattered. I could say that it could have been written better, more tightly, or made it flow easier. We do see that the movie at the beginning, there is a lot of plot holes that later down in the movie, it seems like they forgot about it and then they said, oops, let's explain this plot hole now. For example, Jimmy's twin drowning, their parents divorcing, Haley's parents, stuff like that. It's not all set at the beginning. It actually, as you're going, the characters actually bring it up as like, oh, I forgot to mention this, which to me kind of seems really lazy in a way. It's like, you could have showed it earlier, the movie. We could have showed them like a little montage as the movie starting with the music and the credits, showing them how they were a family before and they slowly started, getting divorced and breaking apart. But no, we just jumped into the movie and we already see that everybody's separated, which is, to me, it seems a little confusing. And then I don't like movies that make me like jump in and then later they explain it, oh, this is the reason why this happened at the beginning. It's like, no, you have to tell me before or slowly hint at it. And then another con is that Lucas is the rival, but it didn't seem like it made sense because actually he's the rival for Corey and not Jimmy. Jimmy's just focused on playing games and getting to, what he says, California. So Lucas could have been written better. I would have liked it if Jimmy kind of played against Lucas more often in small little tournaments to finally get accepted into the major final in California. But it didn't play that well. And then we also see that Lucas is the only guy who with the power glove. I would have basically probably kind of liked it if the power glove was like the trophy at the end of the movie versus a big amount of cash, because we never saw the family enjoy the cash or talk about it or who was going to get it or what they were going to do with it. The only person who mentioned the cash was Haley, saying, with that money, me and my dad can buy a house, which we never saw her dad. We never saw her saying, hey, I have to go home. She actually followed Corey and his family back home. And then one thing that really bugged me is during the tournament at the end, there were some errors. I'm not really sure if it was due to the audio or syncing up the audio with the frame with the picture or the film. During the announcement, what the female announcer says, there's 2 minutes left on the clock. There was actually less than that, or it didn't match up with what we were watching on screen. Also, when the kids are playing the video games, the scores they're announcing does not match up the score on the screen. And let's say, for example, we see Jimmy playing and we saw him dying in the level. The score kind of didn't match every time it went back to it. The reason is because the gameplay was actually filmed ahead of time. So it's not them playing. It's other people playing just to make it fit with the story. And in order to do that, they had to play the game and the score is not consistent. To me, I don't know. It just bugged me now that I rewatched it. But I remember when I first saw it, I didn't even catch that. But now that I went back and reviewed the movie, that actually bugs me. Because nowadays we can go back and digitally remove stuff like that and just reworked around it. But that's one of the things that kind of bugged me. And it's still when Haley's screaming, "Get the star, Jimmy, get the star." Even if he got the star at the end of the levels, it never would have done anything. It would never have given him the lead because it's not a significant thing unless you have 3 stars at the end of the Super Mario. And basically, let's just talk about, I guess, the reason this movie was made. The reason Super Mario Brothers 3 was in this movie was that the game was actually going to be revealed later on, and they opted to put it in the movie, and the movie was going to be the reveal of the game. So this movie was kind of almost like an E3 that Super Mario Brothers 3 was coming out later in the year. So with that, I'm going to let Touly tell us how he saw this movie.
All right. So for me, I'm going to start off by saying that, just like Xiao, I am a huge fan of video games. It is a part of who I am. I grew up, playing video games, and the Nintendo Entertainment System was actually my first console. So I could kind of relate to a lot of the things that were shown in this film. And I would say that if you just want to watch a film that celebrates video game, the phenomena behind it in terms of, when a new console, or in this case, a new video game comes out, it's supposed to be a representation of its time. In this case, Super Mario Brothers 3 being something that people can relate to, the Nintendo Entertainment System, alongside with, of course, all the other games that we showcased in this film, then I would say this film did a great job at the nostalgic factor. But that's as much as I'm going to say about that. With that being said, I'm going to dig into how the movie is in terms of execution and things that we, or at least I would expect from a film for it to be, at the very minimum, good. And I'll just come out and say right off the bat that the film wasn't really that good in that retrospect. So I already mentioned, several things about the film that he didn't like, and I'm sort of just going to ride off of that and probably point out a couple other things too. But I really thought that the idea of incorporating the video game concept into this film was a catalyst for the underlying mission for Jimmy in this film, because he kept on saying California, California, and of course the video game tournament ended up being somewhere in California at the Universal Studios. But in the end, it just came back to the sister who the family lost, and he has not been the same since her death. And it just came back to that idea at the end where, he was able to coincidentally get to that place where he had a picture of the family, used to being together. His brother Corey said that, Jimmy just wanted to say goodbye by coming back to his place, or just to be reminded of how the good times used to be when the family was a whole. In a way, I sort of just saw the video game aspect of this game being a catalyst towards Jimmy's ultimate goal, which to me didn't really feel was related to the video game at all. The video game aspect, I felt, was more for the other two characters, Corey and Haley. They were using Jimmy to get what they want out of their situation. Haley in particular wanted the prize money to go buy a house, and then Corey, I guess Corey just wanted to help Jimmy in a way as well through his struggle, but at the same time he wanted to one up Lucas, as Sal said earlier, who I felt was the rival to one of the protagonists in the film, and I didn't feel like it was necessarily Jimmy, and how Corey felt towards Haley and trying to win her over. Or I can also see in a way where I thought that the idea of Jimmy's situation, him going through his post-traumatic stress disorder situation of losing his sister, how that idea wasn't touched upon enough, and it became sort of a thing that didn't matter, and that the film just kept on bringing it back up at certain points of the film to sort of just remind us, hey, you know, despite you guys playing all these video games or having Jimmy playing all these video games, he still has this thing that he wants to deal with, but we're not going to touch upon it. We're just going to bring it back up every now and again to just remind you as the audience that there is this underlying thing. But right now, the point is to get Jimmy all practiced up for the tournament. So I could kind of look at it in both ways. And for me personally, for the tone of the film, it being very laid back and on the comedy side rather than being on the serious side more often than not, I felt like they should have gone one way or the other. By that I mean they should have either just stick with the whole video game plot line and have these kids get there to this tournament through these struggles and ultimately come out on top, or even losing, but leaving an underlying message because of that, or focus more on Jimmy's situation and how he's coping with the loss of his sister. I think the film would have either A, been more meaningful, or B, just would have been better overall in terms of the story or character development or what have you. I felt like it would have been better in that retrospect. But I thought that the film was doing way too much given the tone that the film has set for like the first third of the movie. Again, so because of that, the film suffered in many retrospects, I feel like. And then just going back to the whole Corey and Haley situation and their banter, I found it more on the annoying side rather than this whole childish banter back and forth, because I feel like even if it was this play of them being young and not understanding how they feel towards one another, I feel like within this chaos of them argument that there is some sort of logic to it. But here, it feels like whatever they said back to each other was so random that I didn't sort of connect to where these two characters were heading. And of course, I already kind of realized that most likely they're going to end up together in some way, or they're going to show one another at some point that they care in that sort of way, about each other. But how it led up to that point, I didn't really care because of how illogical, I guess, the dynamic was between them. And of course, it didn't help that, like I said, how I pointed earlier, it felt to me that they were just using Jimmy, and because of that, I felt like they didn't seem like very, I wouldn't say good people, but I felt like it was undermining their good intention in a way, particularly with Haley. Corey does this whole scheme of trying to sucker people into playing video games against Jimmy and winning money that way. But Haley, she takes it to another level. In a way, she sort of blamed this on her mother. Her mother had like gambling issues apparently. And so it's sort of, the behavior sort of grew on her in a way where she took advantage of people, particularly when they revolved around money. The one example that really stands out to me was when they arrived in Reno and they had one of Haley's friends, who apparently was a trucker. She was shouting out what to do at the craps table for him to kind of execute, and eventually they got kicked out of the casino because, you're getting assistance from children, and children aren't even supposed to be in that sort of environment to begin with, too. So they get kicked out, and the trucker friend ended up winning like $400 or something, and Haley takes the money from him and gives him $10 back and takes the rest. And I'm like, wow. I was like, really? You could have taken a portion, like maybe half. And I was like, okay, I can at least kind of understand where you're coming from. You help the guy win money, he should give you a cut. But she took most of the money back, and B, you're an adult. The adult whose money got taken from didn't react strongly enough for what just happened. It's like, okay, I'll just take the $10 and I'm okay with it. It's like, so realistically, I don't feel like they depicted the adults in a light that I thought they should have been depicted in. And the guy who was chasing the kids around, the guy who was supposed to bring Jimmy back, the dynamic that he had with Jimmy's biological father and the other son, again, I didn't really care for. It was just this thing where they were just trying to one-up each other, at different points of the film. Some of the things that transpired, I just couldn't make sense of because some of the situations could have been avoided, or even if it transpired, they seemed surprised that it transpired the way it did, even though they should have known that it would have led down that road. So again, it's this thing of the adults being more childish than the children in this film. So yeah, I just wasn't feeling that as well. And to Sal's point too, he pointed out the tournament that happened at the end, the tournament that would have won the winner $50,000. I would have suspected more contestants, really, from around the United States come to this tournament. By that, I didn't play. There should have been more competitive players. It felt like this advertising of this tournament, which seemed big. I mean, $50,000 as a prize money, that's a lot for a video game tournament. And for just that many contestants to be there, who I would say some of them not being that great at the game either, based on what they depict in the film. And I would even argue that even Jimmy and Lucas, they weren't that great at the game either, because like I said, I'm a video game fanatic. I've seen high level play. I could even argue I would have done better at the game. I'm not even that great at the games that they were playing. So I think you could sort of blame that too on the timing aspect of the film, where the progress of them playing video game didn't quite match up with how much time went by. So that sort of made me linger on that idea of, you know what, if there's taking them this long to get through this part of the game, they're not really that good, because by this amount of time having passed already, they should have already gone to this stage or made this much progress. Another blunder that I felt the film did, or maybe it's just me being picky at it too, is when they said that the final game that they were going to play in this game was a game that none of the players ever played before. How did Jimmy find out the secret to obtaining that flute item in Super Mario Bros. 3? I don't know, for anybody who has played Super Mario Bros. 3, you guys know what I'm talking about, where it allows you to skip certain worlds. I mean, if he has never played the game before, that's an item that you can't just, you randomly stumble upon it. But they made it seem like he knew what he was doing. So that's me probably being picky about how they executed that, but even then, I was sort of expecting that to happen in a way too, because of how he was struggling to pass certain areas of the game. And I was started thinking, all right, I know what they're gonna do here, but if they're gonna make him do this, they should make it like a random occurrence. But they made it seem that he knew what he was doing already, that he was gonna be able to obtain this item. And even Haley pointed out too, it's like, use the item, you know, it will transport you or whatever. And it's like, how would she even know about that already too, if nobody has ever played the game before? Again, a little plot hole there. I feel like the only thing really that I feel I would gravitate towards in this film is the music. Could be a little overwhelming, but I thought like the infusion of the music at certain points of the film sort of just elevated certain scenes a little bit more than maybe it would have been, because of how the story was being executed, how lackluster it was for me. So I felt like the music, the way was part of the highlight of the film for me. Other than that, I mean, there's not a lot of good things I could say about this film. As I pointed out earlier, as I started my little rant here, if you want to watch a film that celebrates video game, then I feel like this movie did its job. But again, in terms of execution of the story, character development, yada yada yada, not quite there. So
yeah, I totally agree with you, Touly, on that aspects. I mean, this is a fun movie just to sit back and watch for the game aspects, but don't look too into it, because then you'll find all these little mistakes they did and be questioning like, how does Haley know about this, or how does Jimmy know how to play, you know, or get the flute, stuff like that. Going back to my idea of rebooting this movie or remaking it, I would think getting the script and setting it up in a way that he doesn't go straight to a tournament, but rather joins an esport league, a team, and he's not as good, but they see potential in him. Maybe one of his older brothers is already there, and they, you know, he says, my brother Jimmy, he's suffering, but the only thing that he's really good at or wants to do is just play games. That's his escape from the real world. And they join the team, or the manager says, okay, fine, bring him along or something. And then they start seeing the potential in him, and they start nurturing it. So he goes to a few tournaments that he loses, but then all of a sudden he starts getting better. Then he finds the rival. Maybe that's when Lucas comes in, you know, and the rival kicks his ass. And at that point is when Jimmy goes again into his little downward spiral where he's never wants to go, but he remembers, you know, like he knows that he's suffering inside and keeps remembering his sister. And that's when he goes on a losing streak. But then somehow he bounces back. And then from there on is just win, 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 win. Maybe the last part of the tournament is not about the money. Maybe, let's say, just shooting it out there, maybe it's a League of Legends tournament or Overwatch or something, you know, throwing out companies Blizzard and Riot, and the tournament prize is money, but at the same time is designing your own character. Everybody wants to design their own character based on themselves and everything, but then when Jimmy wins, he doesn't care about the money, he just cares about the character that he designs it to represent his sister, who will forever live in this game. And for him, that's his major goal. he wants his sister back. And as long as his sister is in a virtual world, she can never die in his eyes. So in a sense, do something like that, modern spin on it, still keep some elements, but forget about some other elements, like the guy who's chasing after them and getting in arguments and fights with his dad, crashing into cars and stuff like that. Leave that out. Leave out the truckers. Maybe, have Haley in there as a love interest for Corey, but just focus mostly on Jimmy. So to me, that's kind of how I would fix this movie, in a sense. So with that, I'm going to ask Touly for his final grade of the movie.
Well, based on my rant there, I did have a lot of negative to say about the film, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be open by saying this too, by saying I'm going to be a little biased because, like I said, I did grow up playing video games and I did enjoy at least that nostalgic factor. My score is not going to be that much higher, but because of that, it's going to lead to what my score ultimately is going to be for this film. Otherwise, if it didn't have that video game aspect to it, it would have been even lower. So I'm going to give this film a 4.5 out of 10.
Well, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. It's a movie based on games. If anything you can get out of it is, treat people who you think are different with kindness, and just remember everybody's human. The game aspect of it, I enjoyed it as well, but there's a lot of stuff that's wrong with this movie that could have been done better. This movie has potential, and I really strongly believe that it can be remade. So for me, it's going to be a 5 out of 10. So that does it for this review of The Wizard. Please join us next time when we review The Man Who Knew Too Much.
Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be.
Like, comment, and subscribe, and remember, keep watching movies.